All right, everybody, welcome to Why Ping Pong Tables Won't Keep Your Millennials. I know we are in for a great conversation today, and my name is Doug Sandler. I am a podcaster, host of the Nice Guys on Business podcast, a professional speaker through the National Speakers Association, and author of a book entitled Nice Guys Finished First. So thank you so much for being here. If you've ever worked with millennials, if you have a millennial in your life, or if you just want to understand a bit more about this group, this webinar is definitely for you. Aaron Levy is an expert in this space. His company is called Raise the Bar. And the reason for today's webinar is because of the huge amount of response that we got and feedback that we had from from Aaron's appearance on my Nice Guys on Business podcast. So we figured that this would really be a good additional channel, because there's some visuals with this channel as well, and some immediate feedback that we can get from the listening audience. In addition to Raise the Bar, Aaron is a writer for Forbes, a professional speaker, and I see recently, even on his schedule, that he did an event for SHRM in the HR space. He's a coach's coach as well, which is always exciting and very nerve-wracking to actually coach other coaches how to do their job. Excited to get the conversation going. Just some quick housekeeping notes here. Please send in any questions that you have in the little chat box. I believe that would be on everybody's computer in the lower right-hand portion in the chat box, or if there's a little drop-down, just hit the caret and that will lower the chat screen so that you have an open box that you can list your questions, and we will take care of questions. Some of them we will take as we go along if we have a brief pause in the action, and some of them we'll hold until the end if we feel like that might be a good question for the end as well. We want to be responsive to everybody, so keep the questions coming in, and let's have some fun. All right, so let's get rolling. Aaron, are you here? Can you hear me, and are you ready to go?
Doug, I can hear you great. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, all is good. So Aaron, I want to start here because this would be the question that I would ask if I had a professional come on my show, and we've had many professionals on my show, and I may have asked you this question when you came on my podcast, but re-answer it for me for those that are tuning in today. Why are you qualified as the millennial expert?
That's a great question. And I don't know if I'd say that I am the only person qualified or a perfect expert, but what I would say is I am a millennial myself, and I've had the opportunity to work with and coach with hundreds, if not thousands, of different employees from all age ranges and a number of different millennials. I think in the last 9 months, I've talked to probably 200 different companies that have a majority of millennials in their organization. And so it's given me a really interesting perspective. But I would say more importantly than that, it's the fact that I've spent my career studying the science of why people do what they do. Why, when we know something, we know we want to do something, right? I know smoking is bad for me. Do I still smoke? And really trying to understand that gap between knowledge and action, because traditionally we think if we know, we do. And what I've spent my work on is, okay, what's in that gap? Why do people do what they do? How do they do what they do? And over the last 4 to 5 years, I've focused that on millennials themselves.
You know, what's really interesting about what you're saying, Aaron, is we got such a huge response. I mean, almost immediately from our listening audience, we recorded the episode. About 3 or 4 weeks later, the episode came out on our podcast, and then hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of responses and shares on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, whether they were my audience or your audience. This is obviously a topic that a lot of people are talking about, and I mean, you're in it, so you see it on a daily basis. But when I started getting this response, I kept thinking, this isn't normal. So this is obviously a topic that deserves some additional time. When you and I had discussed doing the webinar, we tried to figure out, all right, well, what would be a catchy title? And really, the title is interesting because why don't ping pong tables actually keep millennials? It's not that the ping pong table; it's what the ping pong table represents. So share why don't ping pong tables keep millennials?
Oh, it was really funny. I was actually having this conversation just this morning with an intern at a company. So he's 21, 22, and starting at his company. He said, well, my company has a ping pong table, and we were talking more about it. And even just 2 months into the organization, he could identify that the ping pong table itself wasn't what was going to keep him in the organization. That's not what got him up every morning. That's not what got him excited. And from his story to all the other stories of millennials that I've worked with or millennials I've spoken to, it's at the end of the day, they're staying at their company because they want to feel one of these 3 things. I want to feel purpose and meaning behind the work I'm doing. I want to feel like I'm recognized, and not just recognized for showing up, and not this this participation trophy that everybody talks about. But when I talk about recognition, I mean I want to feel connected to my company, to my team, to my boss, like I'm a part of something. And that kind of rolls back up into I want to feel like I have purpose and meaning. And the third one is they want to feel like they're growing and developing. And ping pong tables or unlimited LaCroix or free lunches, that doesn't fill any of those gaps. What that does is that just provides extra fun, nice things, which I'm not saying are bad, but I wouldn't go and stretch and say that's what's going to keep your employee there, because it's not.
Okay, so tell me, and again, maybe just expand on this a little bit, because it's not as though I'm lost in the idea, but what is the ping pong table and the LaCroix, what does it represent to a millennial, or anybody for that matter?
That's a great question. So what it represents is we're fun, we're young, we're willing to do things different and have fun at work. It's not all about work. And, that's nice. It's nice to know and to be able to see that you can have off time when you're at work, and that, maybe the company values by having the ping pong table, maybe they value not just every single hour that I have to be working and not counting my minutes. Maybe not. Maybe the ping pong table is just there to be there. But that's what it can represent to an employee. And so when you're trying to bring people and excite people to your office, that's something that it can excite them, and it's not going to engage them. It's not going to keep them. It's an external driver, and external drivers don't keep people motivated in the long run. They just don't work.
I can remember when I and I'm beyond the millennial years, but I can remember when I started in the workforce a while back. One of the things that they always promoted and pushed, and this was kind of like the new thing of the day, it was things like childcare in the basement, or childcare in the building, a gym in the building as well. They wanted you to spend and a cleaner picking up your clothes at the office. All of those things seem to be the ping pong tables of my day.
That's so funny that's spot on. And it's not, the ping pong tables aren't going to be the last thing that companies try to bring to their employees as a way to entice them, and yet it's not the solution.
So bring home a point for me that I think that you and I talked about on my podcast, and that is a conversation that is continuing to be had, whether it's the water cooler or in the boardroom. What is it about millennials that employers are just not getting?
That's a great question. I think I mentioned a minute ago, but they're just not getting what millennials are looking for is making an impact. They want to make an impact. There's a study that I read that said something like 3 out of every 4 millennials consider a company's social and environmental commitments when they're thinking about where they work. 44% have turned down a job because of the organization's values. So the organization, the impact, the purpose behind the work they're doing makes a difference. They want to feel connected. They want to feel engaged in the work they're doing. And they want a company that cares about their growth and development. I think there was a Gallup poll that I saw not long ago that said 87% of millennials rate their professional or career growth as opportunities of importance for them in their job. And what employers aren't getting is that all of this, feeling purpose, recognition, and growth, that's a perception that employees have. That's not something external that you can say, hey, here's a ping pong table, here's free drinks, even here are dollars to spend on growth opportunities to go to conferences or to buy books. It's connecting deeper with these needs for millennials.
Help me with some of the questions about why millennials will stay with an organization. What are some of the points and some of the things that they are asking their employers for in order to stay longer? Is it tickets to a conference and heading out to California to do something? Is it a day off with pay if they telecommuting from home? No, I'm sorry, not a day off with pay. That I think we all shoot for a day off with pay. More of a day home with pay and doing telecommuting. What are some of the things that millennials are asking for and reasons why they'll stay?
So I will actually separate those two, because some of the things millennials are asking for aren't necessarily reasons why they'll stay. And it can be frustrating and baffling for employers because they say, well, my millennials are asking for this, or they want that, or they value this, right? They say, I want more cash, or I want to work from wherever I can, or I want a development budget to go to that conference in California. And so they might say those things, and they are saying those things. And what they often don't necessarily realize or connect with themselves is that when they say, I want a promotion, when they say, I want more money, what does that really mean? What that's saying to the outside world is, I've grown. I've been recognized. Right? When I get a promotion, that means I'm recognized by my company. That means I can put it on my LinkedIn page. That means I can tell my friends. When I get more money, that means I can buy more. All of that is a sign that I'm growing, I'm developing, and that I'm being heard and recognized. And so sometimes when I talk to employers, it's not about just giving them what they think they want, but understanding the underlying reasons for their asks. What's beneath that? And in almost every millennial I've talked to, every story I've heard, underneath any one of these asks that may seem unique and individual is a deeper desire to have purpose, a deeper desire to be recognized, and a deeper desire to grow and develop. Does that make sense, Doug?
It totally makes sense, and I hear a lot. I hear this word a lot, and we mentioned this I think earlier in this recording, but we didn't really expand upon it enough. I think, or maybe we didn't get into it. Is this word impact? It's the impact that they not only have with their company, but the impact that they have in their community. So, can you share a little bit about what that really means and what that's all about?
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be, I am feeding the children that don't have food. It doesn't need to be, I'm solving the water crisis. It doesn't need to be this monumental life impact. It means I need to understand how I am within this company, how my work and my role is playing a role in the growth of this company, how this company is actually impacting the world. Whether if we're a tech company and we're helping the world be more efficient, we're helping individuals be more efficient with their life because we give them a productivity tool. And so what often happens is we're no longer in this industrial revolution way of work where we're just individual widgets on an assembly line making the bigger widget, where we don't need to see the whole end of the work project and how we impact and influence it. We just need to make sure we check all the widgets that come by the assembly line. We're now in this knowledge economy where the world of work has just changed. And so our work has changed, and our expectations of solving creative problems and coming up with different solutions. We actually need to see the bigger picture and the bigger scope of what we're doing. And so what that means for millennials is that, hey, I want to know how I'm making an impact in the work that I'm doing. I want that to be tied in, and I want to be able to see that.
So we are talking with Aaron Levy, and he is a millennial expert. And if you're just joining our webinar now, we appreciate you being here. There will be a recording that will be available after the webinar is complete. If you are just joining us, we are having some issues with the mute button on our side, completely our technical issue that Aaron and I, between the two of us, trying to figure out how to run the webinar. If you're just joining in, if you'll just mute your microphone, that would be great. We have a number of people that are joining in and may not be aware of that. If you have any questions, enter them into the chat box. Certainly we will field the questions as they come in, or if it's a question that we think would be better held till the end, we'll hold it there. Aaron, let's continue the conversation for a second, because I'm fascinated with everybody always focused on millennials as the part of the company, but not necessarily focused on them as the leaders of a company. And I know that there are a lot of millennial leaders that are out there in some of the younger organizations. Can you separate for me the companies that have millennial leadership as opposed to a company that might have a different style of leadership? What does that look like to you as you are? I mean, you work with millennial either run or millennial organizations that have a number of them in their workforce. Can you share with what a millennial run organization kind of looks like and feels like a little bit?
So yeah, it's really hard to define that perfectly. I think there are some of the bigger organizations that we might think of, the Fortune 100s, even the Fortune 500s that have been around for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, even more years, that a lot of their leadership is not millennial, And that's because they've done a great job of keeping lifers and keeping people in their company. So their leadership is really top heavy. And there are a lot of baby boomers and Gen Xers there. And so they don't have a lot of millennial leaders. And that's part of the issue that they're facing right now is if 75% of the workforce is going to be millennial in the next 3 years, how are we connecting? How are we relating? And then how are we surviving in 10, 15 years when we are retiring or moving on from business, and who are our leaders? Other organizations, I've found that there is no distinction between who can be a leader and who can't be. And there are millennials that are leaders, and there are millennials that are in all different phases of the game. And so it depends on the situation of the company. And a lot of times what I find is these millennial leaders are first-time leaders. And so they themselves don't have the tools and skills needed to lead their other millennials. And so they're facing the very same issues that Gen X and baby boomer leaders are facing too with their millennial population.
Maybe off the topic just a little bit, but in the leadership realm of things, because I know that we have a number of people that are tuned in for the millennial subject, but leadership came up, and that's such a prevalent subject today. Can people be born into a leadership role? Not a role, but can they actually role? As a millennial, can you aspire to be a leader of an organization that isn't necessarily millennial driven right now?
Well, I like that you went in this direction, because when I think about, I'll get us back to it, I promise. When I think about purpose and recognition and growth, and I talked about those being perceptions of the individual, the biggest and most impactful way that you can actually make a difference in someone's perception within an organization, you can have ping pong tables, you can give them budgets to go to California for conferences, you can do all of those things, and yet that won't necessarily impact the individual's perception. The one biggest piece of leverage that a company has is their managers, are their leaders. Those are the people that have direct connection and direct input into and influence into the individual millennials and individual employees, regardless of gender or age or any of that. That's the biggest point of influence. And so having great leaders is what makes your company able to connect with millennials and connect with every individual, because even though we're talking about millennials in generalities here and stereotypes, every individual is different. Their background, what their upbringing was, what life situations they had, that will also dictate what they're wanting for and what they're looking for in life. And so what I tell companies is the biggest point of influence, the biggest focus is having great leaders that can be better coaches for their employees and not just task managers. And unfortunately, in most companies, people are promoted into leadership roles because they're really good at doing their job, and not necessarily because they're good at leading people. And so when you ask this question, do you believe some people are born leaders? I say no. What happens is some people have those skills and use those skills more readily in their life. But I'm a firm believer that leadership skills, like being able to listen, ask powerful questions, get curious, motivate, evaluate your people, have direct communication, those are skills that you can train. Just like Excel or just like Salesforce skills, those are skills that you can train, and it seems hard because they're soft skills, but it's just taking deliberate practice. I mean, I'm a certified coach, and I got certified because I spent 6 to 12 months doing 200 hours of training on just soft skills. I learned how to listen actively, and I got coached on it, and I had people review me, and I had to practice it, and I had to do all of that. Those are skills that I learned.
It's interesting that we're talking about leadership roles within an organization that's run maybe by a non-millennial. Oftentimes, and there's a question that came up in the chat box about how long millennials are staying at their organization, and I think what's interesting about it is and maybe it's a stereotype, and you can certainly help confirm or deny this, but many of the millennial generation, they're leaving companies faster and faster, which oftentimes means to me that the ones that stay at organizations tend to be the ones that rise to the top. Now, it takes a little bit longer time because you're staying within an organization. You're not hopping from one to the other. So the question remains, as it's asking in the chat box, how long are millennials staying at their organizations on average right now?
I don't know if I have the exact stat on me, but I think it's something between 1.3 and 1.7 years.
Wow.
And so that that sticks pretty closely to what I just see anecdotally. About 12 and 18 months is the typical turnover time if we look at average on millennials. So it's kind of crazy because if you think about it I ran operations for a business, and you think about the operational component of it, people, when you hire them, it takes them a couple months to kind of just get into things and get going. And really, it probably takes a full year till they're as productive as they can be. And at months probably 15 to 18, they're returning more than they're actually producing. And so if you're losing people at that point, you're just then starting the cycle over. And you're losing the potential benefits of having somebody who grasps all the things, who can talk about the company, who can figure out and solve those problems, because they're not there anymore.
Well, some people go from project to project, and I think it's almost like it's a mentality rather than a system that's in place within an organization. Certainly, I know a lot of organizations try to have people that are exceptional at projects, and they head those people in those particular projects. But we live right now in such a let's just call it a gig economy. It's almost like there's more of a project hop from one to the other. What impact does that gig economy have on millennial turnover? I see it as it's got to really excel with millennial turnover. We've got to expedite it and keeps it rolling, because we are in such a gig economy right now.
Yeah, I think the gig economy is also really related to just kind of this on-demand society that we have, where anything is at our fingertips, right? I can order lunch right now, and it'll be delivered by the end of this podcast. And I could go stream any video I want from my couch. I can go order a printer for my business and have it by tomorrow. All these things you can get instantaneously. And the gig economy is kind of like that as well, because I can go get a job tomorrow. I can go work for Uber in 2 hours. I can work for Lyft. I can put my services on Upwork or any of these other consulting places where you bid out for projects. And what that does is it, as you said, Doug, it expedites the process, and also it makes instant gratification at an all-time high. Mm-hmm. Where if I want something, I can get it. And this is not just for millennials. This is everybody. Who enjoys standing in line anymore? I know my wife and I talk about this all the time, but if our Netflix freezes for 3 seconds, we roll our eyes and we look at each other like, what is wrong with it? And yet, if I think back, I can remember when I had dial-up. I was going to say that. I'm just remembering that noise, right? And it's like, okay, I'm signing on. In 4 more minutes, I will be on, and I can check an email or do something on the internet. And so the change over the last 10 years has just been so dramatic that all of us crave instant gratification now. And the gig economy is somewhat of a match in that way, where I can get a different project. I can do a different job. I don't have to do what I'm doing tomorrow, because tomorrow I can drive for Lyft. And so there's so many different opportunities. The only thing that really scares me about it is when you start your own company, you have to file paperwork. You have to do all of these different things. You have to think of a bunch of different consequences. There is a hurdle to doing that. I'm sure, Doug, as you know, with your businesses, there's a hurdle. You can't just turn it on tomorrow and have an official company. And there's a beauty in that, because it really makes you consider and think about the impact of leaving a job, of not having benefits, of having to pay for X, Y, and Z. The gig economy, you can just turn on and start driving for Lyft in a minute. And so you are not a part of Lyft. You're not a part of those companies. You're actually an independent contractor. You're your own business person. And so the scary thing about that for me is individuals who take that on full time and don't have the full understanding of what they're getting into and what they need to provide for themselves from a benefits perspective, from a general life perspective, that you might be missing by jumping quickly into something like that. So I love the gig economy, but it also kind of has some things that scare me a little bit if people aren't taking the full scope of the picture. I
would say, as a business owner myself, my biggest hurdle is business development. And it's one of those things where, as you said, if you step into an Uber or a Lyft or an Upwork, while you still have to be able to be available to access the system, that's pretty much the only hurdle that you have. Uber almost gives you guaranteed work, just because they want to keep their drivers. what are your best tips for keeping a millennial? Because you got to not only get them, but you got to keep them. If you want to exercise and have that talent on board, you got to be able to keep them interested, engaged, and a part of your workforce. So, do you have some best tips for keeping them around as long as possible? Because I don't want them to go anywhere. They're too talented.
Yeah, and I think one of the things to notice here is that part of it is, yes, these tips and what I share with you will help engage your people and will help connect them and keep them around longer. And part of the world in which we work in today, there is more turnover just in general. And so there will be some of that overlap. So none of this is going to guarantee you to keep an employee forever. And I think there is good turnover where people leave because they can't fulfill themselves fully, right? They've grown to the extent they can grow in your organization, and the next step is to support them in growing somewhere else, somewhere bigger. And so I say all of that as kind of the pretext for there's some great tips that you can use. If we think in the construct of this of, okay, if millennials want purpose, they want recognition, they want growth, how do we give that to them? And one of the ways is being really clear on your employee value proposition, right? Why should I come and do my work for you? Why are you in business? Why should I care to work here and to do my best work here? And it's really thinking about it in their shoes, putting yourself in their shoes. Why does working here matter? The other thing I would say is, it makes me think about a story from when I was working at one of the first companies I worked at, and we were a company that held all of our information close to our chest. And we came to a point in the business where we had to let go of about 15% of our staff. And we were a startup, but we really wanted to seem like a stable company for our employees. They didn't have to worry about their job on a daily basis. And so we hadn't told them our financial information. And when we had to let go of 15% of our staff, we actually had to stop and say something different. We had to let them know. We couldn't just say, hey, we let go of these people, everything's fine. We had to be open and transparent. And I remember that day where we instead of withholding our information, we shared authentically with the team where we were at, what was going on, and what the next steps we could take are. And by being open and vulnerable, what ended up happening was our people connected, our people dove in, our people engaged, because they saw us as fallible leaders, as not just these people up on a pedestal, but actually on their level. We connected with them, we engaged with them, and everybody came out more invested in the success of all of us together. And so being vulnerable is another tip. It helps us be all together. And what I tell leaders is, before your next all hands meeting, ask yourself these 3 questions: is what am I trying to protect my team from? What am I not sharing as a result? And really, what's the impact of holding this information or withholding this information on me, on my team, and on the company? And you'll be very surprised at what happens when you actually open up and share vulnerably where you're at. And it doesn't need to be a failing company or a company that's just share vulnerably different situations. And leaders don't need to be perfect. They just need to be themselves.
Aaron, talk about for a second some of the companies that are doing it right. I mean, do you have any examples that you're thinking of that organizations that, hey, we got this, and whether they're a household name or not? But I'm very curious if there's some companies that you know of that are getting it right.
Yeah, Patagonia, that's a household name. We all know it. They do so much. And if you actually look at their website and you look at their mission and their vision and the work they do, they have great words, right? They talk about, if you care about a company where employees treat work as play and regard themselves as ultimate customers, then you have to be careful who you hire. You have to treat them right. You have to train them. And here's one of the things they say. At Patagonia, the protection and preservation of the environment isn't what we do after hours. It's the reason we're in business and every day's work. So that's their value proposition to the employees and to the world. Yet it's one thing to say what you do, because you can go on a bunch of companies' websites and read what they say, but they actually do so much around that, right? They have this movement of worn wear where they have people coming and repairing clothes. So if you have something from Patagonia, you can go take it in and get it repaired. They give back 1% of their sales to preservation and restoration of the natural environment. So I think it's somewhere in the upwards of 70 million that they've donated.
Wow.
And so they not only say, they don't only have words, but they have actions that follow up with that. So as an individual, you can see, oh my God, these people do really care and do purposeful, meaningful work. There's a company here, a local company called DMC, and I was talking to the founder the other day, and they are on the top of Crane's best places to work list in Chicago year in and year out. I think every year since the list has been around for the last 13 years. And what they do that's really fantastic is they give autonomy, and they allow people to grow and to take challenges and to take risks on themselves. And the founder, he just was telling me how he had someone who's from St. Louis who wants to go back and move there. And so he said, well, I'll help you start up an office there. So DMC is starting up an office in St. Louis, and they're helping him grow this office and develop it. And that's part of actually not just saying we help you grow, but we're going to put you in positions that you're going to grow.
It's interesting what you're talking about. It's almost like that would be an attractive factor for anyone, regardless of whether they're millennials or not. And there's a question that came in the chat box, and we'll share it towards the end. But it's all about, are we really that different? Are millennials really that different? That's the question. So let's get to that in just a second. I want to hit one, which is, if you had to share one tip to share with a leader of millennials, what would it be?
Yeah. So if you have to think about what's one skill or tool or tip that you could take, it's really being able to listen with attention and intention. And what I mean by that is, if you're able to really listen to your employees, if you're able to listen to them and give them your full attention with your cell phone put away, not texting or not typing on your computer, just show them that you're listening to them and listen with the intention of actually hearing them, of actually understanding them. If you're able to do that, then you're able to take away what they care about, what's important to them, what they really value. And from there, the world is an option for you. If you know that my employee cares about this and values this, then the actions that you can take and the way that you can support them is going to be different for every individual employee. Because as you said, are we really that different from every other generation? And in some senses, yes, but in a lot of senses, no. We're all individuals, and so we all have different needs, and we all have different desires for growth, and we all have different desires for our work and expectations for our relationship with our manager. So as a leader, if you can simply listen with attention and intention, that is the single most important thing I could share.
I couldn't imagine that. Again, I'm looking at this just from a communication and relationship perspective and saying that from all of the things that you're saying, it just seems like it makes sense that those that are millennials, not only are they not really different than the majority of us, but they just want what we all want, which is they want to be cared for, they want to care, they want to have an impact within the organization, they want to be recognized. Let's go to that chat question. Are millennials really that different? Do you see any difference? Because I really can't, based upon certainly difference in personality, and they're growing up in a different technology age than I was, and that even younger than them or have grown up in. But what's the difference between a millennial and someone else? Do you see a difference?
So it's a really good question, because I get asked this all the time. They are different. And we're talking in generalities. We're not talking every single individual millennial. There's a lot of things that are basic core human being needs, and we all want to be cared for. We all want connection. We all want a lot of these things, but if we think about it as, what do we prioritize? Because if there's a lot of needs that we have and a lot of things that we want in life, there are some things that certain generations might prioritize more than others, where, Gen Xers saw work as a job, and baby boomers saw work as a career. Millennials see it as a calling. They see it not just as a means to make money and to live, and they see it as a means to impact the world. They are more focused and value community more than their own individual growth or experience within a company. And so, because of some inciting incidents from 9/11 to the housing market crash, those inciting incidents had an impact on the way millennials see the world and interpret the world. And so they just are a little bit different in that sense. And what I would also say is I mentioned a little bit, but they're coming up into this working world where the working world is changing, where we're no longer doing the Industrial Revolution, clocking in 9 to 5. We're actually doing more creative work, and we're thinking more about outcomes than simply hours. And so they're a part of that kind of revolution of changing the world of work from saying, hey, do you really care that I'm here 9 to 5? That's actually an old structure that was from when they had assembly lines. Does 9 to 5 really matter? But what really matters actually is you getting the outcome from me, you getting the results, and not me being here for 8, 10, 12 hours. Sometimes it might take me 12 hours to get the results. Sometimes it might take me 4, but you care more about the results, right? And so that we're a generation where we're starting to ask that, and that's a part of our generation, but also just a part of the time that we are in the world of work. I also talked about kind of the on-demand nature of everything, right? Everything's on demand. So instant gratification at being at an all-time high, on top of being able to see what all your friends are doing on LinkedIn and the trips they go on and their Instagram posts, and everyone posts the best part of their lives
Right.
on social media. They don't post, I had a tough day, or I had trouble waking up today because I really didn't want to go to work. Right? They all post, my job, I just got promoted, or my company just raised money, or I just went to South America on this amazing trip. And we start to have this grass is always greener picture, but it's so much more in our face than it was maybe 20, 30 years ago, where you couldn't see everything that everybody was doing all the time. Literally, you can see it all the time. You can go onto any one of the social medias and see what's going on. And so it's created this drive for us to want more. And if you think about what used to happen is we go to high school with the goal, like society's goal for us. Let's go to high school so that we can go to college. And when we're in college, the goal is
to get a job.
Get a job. Thank you, Doug. Right? It's like we don't even need to think about this. Okay.
You heard my mom. That was my mom talking right there.
Right? I was listening to somebody today, and she was talking. We were sharing your biggest brag, and she goes, "I have 2 kids that are graduated from college and they're working jobs." And that was the goal, right? That's the goal, is everybody's working a job. But then you get into your job, and 20 years later, you pick up your head and you say, what am I doing this for?
Yeah.
Why am I here? What does this matter? What do I really care about? And that was what we used to call the midlife crisis, right? And things would change in our lives, and we'd reevaluate everything. Yet, because of this instant gratification, because of this changing world of work, because of millennials just being different, the midlife crisis is no longer a midlife crisis. It's more like a quarter life crisis happening, when you're in your late 20s and early 30s, and people are starting to ask that question.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. So, Aaron, we just have a couple of minutes to go, so that would be a cue to our audience. If you are listening in and you have any last-minute questions for Aaron, we've listed a bunch of those already and shared those with Aaron, and he's given some great answers as well. We'll make sure that we make a recording available to everyone. We'll send out email links to everybody that is tuned in today and that has registered for the webinar. So, Aaron, if someone in our listening audience of this webinar wants to get a hold of you, just share that information. Oh, you put it. That's good. You put it right up on the screen. I guess they could read it. That's right. Just share what's the easiest way in order to get to you, Aaron?
Probably the easiest way to reach out to me is my email, aaron@raisedbar.co. Pretty good about it. So if you have any questions or anything you need, just reach out. I will make sure, as Doug said, I'm sure Doug will too, but I'll also reach out and just give you my email so you have it, and make sure you have the link for the webinar recording, and feel free to ask any questions that you have.
Great, Aaron. Thank you so very much for being a part of the webinar today. I knew it would answer a lot of questions that I had. I know that it's going to make a big impact on. There you go, another millennial making another impact. See, that's further propagating the stereotype that you guys want to make impact, right?
Exactly.
We'll make sure that we make the recording available for everybody. And thanks for being a part of the webinar today, Aaron, very much.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate it. I had a blast talking to you.
Great. Everybody, thanks again for tuning in. We will talk to you soon. Thanks again.